Well, good morning. I wanted to make sure that we got a chance to go over some really key points for today's lecture. We're looking at chapter 13 on problems and resilience. Okay, so our learning objectives have to do with distinguishing between internalizing and externalizing problems among adolescents, identifying two types of delinquency in Moffat's theory and comparing their origin, and then identifying the main types and causes of treatments of depression and suicide in adolescents. And then finally, distinguishing between potential protective factors and risk factors when determining if an adolescent is resilient. We talked earlier in the semester about resilience, and this chapter actually gives you the definitions and gives you some examples. So while I'm showing the PowerPoint and I'm also showing, I found the textbook on CourseSmart. Might be a really reasonable way for you to get your textbook and be able to read it. So I'm hoping I can move around through pages. I have them marked, and I hope I can move around through pages so we can discuss some of the topics. So right now I'm going to go to, you're seeing me move around, but I'm going to go to page 363, which is the beginning of the chapter, and we're going to look at those internalizing and externalizing behaviors. So again, if you look at the book, then page 363 tells you where to go. And so let's talk about those internalizing and externalizing behaviors. And the slide, you see that externalizing behaviors are those behaviors that generally manifest more in girls than in boys, although boys can have internalizing behaviors too. And what they tend to do is act out on those behaviors. So those problems, internalizing, we talked about depression being anger turned inward and anxiety. It's those types of feelings that students or young people tend to push down, like anxiety, depression, eating disorders. These are how those internalizing problems manifest. They can originate from your family, from circumstances, and from situations. And so your slide says that the distinction between internalizing and externalizing, and let me explain externalizing behaviors. We know that boys more than girls, although I don't know if the stats are still the same as time goes on, tend to act out on their feelings. So they're going to be the young people who tend to have the oppositional defiant disorder or behavior disorder, and they're going to engage in such things like, fighting, uh, delinquent behavior like acting out, driving cars really fast, you know, bullying a lot of times, although girls can be just as mean spirited as boys. Um, Substance abuse, acting out, using, and then taking risky behaviors, like using your skateboard to jump off the roof of the house, thinking you're going to be able to fly. Not really sure what the rationale is about that. But anyway, those are examples. Then your slide says, bear in mind the distinction between the two types is not absolute. A delinquent adolescent might also be depressed. So research shows that adolescents with both types of internalizing and externalizing behaviors tend to have difficulty in their family of origin. And I'd like for you at some point to type in, or when you do your video discussion, to kind of give some examples. You can give personal examples of those that from other students. So let's move on because we only have about 15 minutes. So let's move on to the next one. Identifying the two types of delinquency in Moffat's theory. And I found this in page 372. So let me go to page 372. And at the very bottom, you see some charts that indicate um, behavior. These charts kind of talk about the age and crimes of males because, again, we said that boys tend to act out more. So the age period, which is between around 20, is the most high risk behaviors. Um, and and then over here it says Um, of the 100 males, there's about, the average age is around 18 in most delinquent behavior. So Moffat's theory, let's go back to Moffat's theory at the bottom of page 372, says that there's a life course persistent delinquency, and then there's adolescent limit delinquency. And so sometimes we say, we ask young people, why did you do that? And I'm going to go over here to slide 23. Why'd you do that? And they go, I don't know. Well, actually, they kind of mean it. They really don't always know, because it may be, their behavior may be driven by internal feelings, relationships, arguments, girlfriend, boyfriend problems, peer problems. Maybe their friends are, they're in the out group instead of the in group. Or maybe their parents are really having some difficulty. According to your slide, delinquency, I don't like using that term, but we associate that with young people or adolescents who are engaging in criminal behavior. And these are the different types of offenses that young people have also been labeled with. So there's status offenses that where you're only going to break laws that normally an adult, it wouldn't be law breaking if an adult was doing it. So drinking, underage drinking, cigarette smoke. You know this. You probably know somebody who was involved. I won't say it was you, but you probably know somebody who was engaged in, like, smoking marijuana, although adults could get in trouble for that as well. Index crimes, serious crimes at any age, violent crimes, property crimes, and then non-index crimes, less serious offenses such as gambling or disorderly conduct or vandalism or things like that. So look at the bottom of page 372 to see Moffat's comparison between the two delinquent types of delinquency. You'll probably see it on your exam. Oh, and looky there. There is the slide we talked about. And this is comparing, I see now, different time frames. So in the early 1800s or mid 1800s, risky behavior happened around the age of 20. As time goes on, the further we live, the longer we live, the younger young people start. And I think that's true. Even let's look at teenage pregnancy. Although it's declined, the age of young girls who get pregnant has also started to decline. So we've got record of girls being pregnant at age 8 and 9. Really got to look at the problem behaviors within the family for that. Okay, so let's just move right along. Identifying the main types, causes, and treatments of depression in adolescents. And I'm going to take a little bit more time with this topic just because I think it's so very important to understand that young people don't just act out because, they're weird or they're difficult. They actually are having difficulty processing the fact that biologically they're going through changes. This is a time when socially life is very, very stressful, and a lot of times in family dynamics, their parents are also going through changes around this time, so they're trying to process their parents' craziness, if you will, or inconsistency, or overbearingness, all of those types of things going on. Plus, they're trying to develop this autonomy, this sense of independence. And what we're finding is they're really struggling with that. So I'm going to go to slide 32 here. Don't you like how organized I am? I really think so. When we look at this, we're talking about, I'm going to go back just a little bit, risky behavior, the culture of risky behavior. And what this slide just shows is that young people die more frequently than they think, although they have that immortal sense of immortality. They're never going to die. What we see across nations and culturally, we have more young people engaged or deaths from homicide and suicide rates among 15 to 24-year-olds. And it's the highest, unfortunately, in the United States, with the United Kingdom, which is England, following behind. Interestingly enough, Canada and Japan have high rates of suicide. The United States and England have higher rates of homicide. Really sad stats, and I'm sure they're greater now as time goes on because this book was written in 2012, so things change. When we talk about, let's talk about those issues around depression. I have all my little handouts here, so you see me moving around to get my handouts. But let's talk about danger signs in depression. And how many of you know, boys who demonstrate depression as much as girls? When we think about the suicide rate, um, the thought is that girls attempt suicide, boys actually commit suicide. So the stats show that girls attempt, that means they try suicide. It's more about attention getting behavior or trying to cry out for support, not necessarily because they're spoiled, but because they really are seeking some help. Whereas boys have this fatalistic thought about life, and what they tend to do is they want to end the pain. Girls want help with how to process the pain, and boys just want to end. It's very different, and so you'll find that their acts of self-harm are more fatal and more definite, such as using guns and hangings and that kind of thing, where girls may tend to, slit their wrist or use drugs of some sort, which may take a little bit more time, and the likelihood of them being found is much greater. So I know this is not necessarily a lighthearted topic, but it's very pertinent when you're talking about working with young people, and you need to pay attention to what's going on when they're in class and they're having some difficulty focusing or they're sleeping all the time. I can tell you that I'll just close just a little bit. The emergency, family emergency that we had to do with an adolescent who was in distress, and in talking to the family, what we started to see is that it was at school that this child actually manifested more of the symptoms or outcries for help. And one really key, some key factors was sleeping all the time, sleeping in class, and then the parent at home finally indicated, or the caregiver at home indicated, that the child was up all night long. So there's sleep deprivation, inability to focus, agitation, argumentative when that is not this child's characteristics. Starting to have some hallucinations and delusions, hearing voices, saying that they were a different person. So all of these are indications that this child was having some difficulty, and the manifestation of that just was just heart wrenching and horrendous. And so it's important as a teacher for us to pay attention to those symptoms. This slide just shows you the levels of depression. There's a depression checklist, so you can literally ask. It's okay to ask a young person, you know, have you like had little motivation hanging out with your friends lately? Have you gained or observe? I noticed you gained weight or lost weight in the last, and that's a sensitive topic, but I noticed just some changes about you physically. You look really tired. You're not focusing. Normally, you're engaged in class and you're not focusing. You seem to be a little sluggish, slowing down, and you see how you can communicate it in a way that you're not having this. Are you not sleeping and all of this? You can ask it in a very engaging kind of way. When you're talking, you just don't seem to be really excited about life, or you seem to have this view that everything is bad in life, and I'm really concerned about you. So that's one good way that you can start to assess, and you can literally use this checklist. I use it in counseling, and if I have a young person, I had a young person not too long ago who just kept having nightmares about dying. I asked a few more questions, sent that young person to a psychiatrist only to verify that they were really having some difficulty, and this young person was indeed suicidal. So it's good to know these. Let's go on to what your thoughts are. When we talk about diathesis stress model in terms of genetic and environmental factors, that's in your textbook, and let me give you what page. Let's go to, I had it right here, so I'm a little frustrated with myself because I haven't gotten as proficient with doing this as I'd like. But let me just define it for you. So the diathesis stress model, indicates that the